So one last quick video to wrap things up here. The last concept we have to cover this week is that of roles. So a role is essentially just a behavior that is expected of a specific status. A role set, then, is the collection or an array of roles attached to any given status. So for example, the role set for the status of being a college student includes going to class, studying, doing homework, even socializing is a role that's expected of college students, right? So it's not just necessarily the required task that you're expected to complete, it's any behavior that's associated with a particular status that you occupy. Role strain refers to instances wherein the expectations of one status are impossible for us to satisfy, okay? So you might experience role strain in your status of being a student when you're deciding whether or not you should go to a party on Saturday night or begin working on a project for one of your classes, right? So you have two different role expectations within this status of being a college student. You have a party to go to, that's one role that you're expected to fulfill, and you have a project to work on, a second role that you have to fulfill. However, you don't have the time or the resources to complete both of those roles or to properly engage in both of those roles simultaneously. So in that instance, when you're unable to fulfill the multiple expectations of one particular status, you experience a role strain. Now, a role conflict refers to something a little bit different. Role conflict occurs when you occupy two or more statuses and they have incompatible expectations with one another. So for example, you may experience role conflict this weekend because you want to begin working on a project that you have for a class, which would be a role of a student, but your boss called you and asked you to pick up an extra shift at the restaurant that you work at, which is the role of you being a worker, right? So you have these two different statuses, being a student, being a worker. They have conflicting roles that do not coincide with one another. It's impossible or very difficult for you to meet the expectations of the roles of each of these different statuses that you occupy simultaneously. So that's role conflict. So role strain occurs when there's some sort of incompatibility or inconsistency, inability of you to fulfill the roles within one status that you have. And role conflict occurs when it's difficult for you to occupy or fulfill the roles of multiple different statuses that you hold. Okay? So just a quick recap on the content we covered this week. Both Cooley's Looking Glass Self and Meath Taking the Role of the Other heavily emphasize how humans develop a sense of self through interacting with one another. This is very much a symbolic interactionist argument, building on this idea that human interaction and the meanings that we attach to both other people and objects in our life have really meaningful impact on how we come to identify who we are and develop our sense of self as individuals. As social beings, we are constantly engaging in this practice of impression management, as Goffman says, which regulates how we behave during interactions, which is our attempt to try and control how other people perceive us. So we're constantly trying to negotiate how other people perceive us. More often than not, we want to be viewed favorably in situations, and so we affect the way we appear and the way we interact with others in those different contexts to try and control how other people perceive us. Socialization is the interactional process through which we learn the expected values and behaviors of different groups that we are a part of. We all hold many different statuses. Some statuses we are born into, those are the ascribed statuses, and others we earn based off our behaviors, those are the achieved statuses. Also remember, all of us have different master statuses, which are the main statuses that people use in interactions with us to guide how they're going to behave. And lastly, each status that we occupy has a unique role set, which is a set of behaviors a person holding a particular status is expected to fulfill. So I hope you enjoyed this week's content. This is definitely the first week that we kind of dive into some of the meaty and really interesting context of sociology, and it's only going to get more interesting from here. So buckle in. We are about to jump into the rougher waters of the field of sociology in the coming weeks.